Hey everyone, Skull902 here, and now I finally put this thing to rest. It all started 3 years ago, I made up for the first LP earlier this year, and today I'm finishing it. This is the extra video for my Let's Play of Sonic the Hedgehog 2. There are plenty of things to cover, so let's get into it. Let's begin with some gameplay that I didn't show before. Okay, so this is Super Sonic's gameplay. Once you get all the Chaos Emeralds and you have 50 rings, you just jump, and you turn into Super Sonic. You are invincible. You are faster, except for when you're rolling. For some reason, Super Sonic has like a slower roll when he's rolling. It actually fucks up his momentum, which is weird, and they didn't fix that until Sonic and Knuckles. But invulnerability, he's faster. It's some good stuff. Fun to play with, though the activation is kind of annoying at times, not gonna lie. But that's Super Sonic. And now for Tails. Tails is like an exact copy of Sonic's gameplay. He can't fly like he can in Sonic 3. Only the AI is allowed to do that, so he's just a copy of Sonic, pretty much. There's really no difference, aside from the smaller hitbox. Tails has a slightly smaller hitbox than Sonic because he's not as tall, so I don't know, that could be useful in some situations, I guess. But, yeah. So now the multiplayer mode. With multiplayer, you get 4 maps to choose. You have Emerald Hill, Mystic Cave, the Special Stage, and Casino Night Zone, which, of course, I will be showing. Here's the footage of Emerald Hill Zone. Multiplayer is like a split-screen thing. Obviously, as you can see, it's the full level designs here. Basically, what you do is, if you have items on, and like, I'll show an example of this, but like, if you have items on, it's all about the item boxes that you break, about the rings that you collect, and who finished first. So it like collects all of that together in like the main stages. In the special stages, it's all about who has the most rings. And I think like when you turn the items off, it's like just about rings and the time. So basically what it does is it compares the amount of rings that you have, the item boxes that you've broken if you have those on, and the amount of time that it took you to finish the stage, and it averages that all up into a way to determine the winner. And this is a good example. I finished in second in this race, but I won the match anyway because I had better rings compared to my brother's item boxes and his time on the level. So, you know, that's basically the gist of Sonic 2 multiplayer. It's a fun time. Now we're going to get into the cheat codes. Starting off with the more well-known ones, in order to access the level select, go to the options menu and play sounds 19, 65, 9, and 17 in the sound test. Press start to get back to the title screen, and then A and start to get to the level select menu. This is also the only time in the game the Death Egg is shown from the outside, in its zone icon. Here's a neat little fact. This code is a reference to Yuji Naka's birthday, September 17th, 1965. Want to play as Super Sonic but without going through the special stages? If you play the sounds 4, 1, 2, and 6 in the level select menu, the Chaos Emerald sound effect will play, letting you know that all the emeralds are in your possession and you can play as Super Sonic so long as you have 50 rings at your disposal. If you want to get to debug mode, play the sounds 1, 9, 9, 2, 1, 1, 2, and 4 in the level select menu. This code is a reference to Sonic 2's North American and European release date, November 24th, 1992. In debug mode, you can mess about by placing objects wherever you please or just completely cheese your way through a level. Because cheating makes you cool, am I right? If you want access to debug mode and have Super Sonic, put in the normal code plus the additional sounds 1, 2, and 6. We'll get back to debug mode a little later on. Here's a bit of a freaky one. In the options menu, if you play 1, 1, 2, and 4 in the sound test, you get 14 continues. Sounds great, right? Wrong. Because if you do that, the sound will glitch and you'll only be able to hear the Oil Ocean music for the rest of the game. I think I can speak for all one of the me's out there when I say that would be a traumatizing experience. Hashtag fuck Oil Ocean. Doesn't sound worth it to me, unless you mute the game or something, I don't know. Are you a weeb and want to make the game more like the Japanese version, even if on the surface both versions are identical? Then press up, down, 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 up on the title screen and choose to play as Tails. This code changes his name to Miles in the HUD. It works vice versa in the Japanese version to change his name to Tails. This one's pretty interesting. In order to play the game in night mode, you need to enable debug mode in the level select and then press C and start when selecting a level. This will make most things on the screen appear darkened. This mode was actually used in Sonic 2 and 3 to help the developers with level design. Pretty neat, ain't it? Now, it might not seem at first glance that Knuckles in Sonic 2 has stuff like the level select, but it indeed does have those things. To get to the level select menu, press up, 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 down, 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 left, right on the title screen, then press A and start. Knuckles has different sound test codes than Sonic and Tails. To enable Super Knuckles, play the sounds 1, 6, 7, 7, 7, 2, 1, and 6 in the level select menu. Though considering how easy it is to get the Chaos Emeralds as Knuckles, I've gotta wonder if it's even necessary. Last but not least, to enable debug mode as Knuckles, put in 1, 9, 9, 4, 1, 0, 1, and 8 in the level select sound test. As far as I'm aware, there's no code that lets you enable debug and Super Knuckles at once. This code, much like the level select and debug codes in the normal game, refers to a specific date, October 18th, 1994, which was the North American and European release date of Sonic & Knuckles. So now, let's take a look at the endings I didn't get in either playthrough I did for the game. First up, we have Sonic's good ending. The cutscene that plays before the ending little bit is exactly the same for both Sonic and Knuckles, but as I have previously pointed out, we have Sonic here, he's falling, Tails comes to save him, and then Sonic says, "Yo Tails, fuck right off with that bullshit, I'm gonna fly on my own." And then we got the little bald eagles going around and everything. What the fuck, Sonic? What the fuck? You are an absolutely horrible friend, and I hate you. I fucking hate you, Sonic. You were my favorite character, but now I hate you for some reason. Go fuck yourself. Okay, I'm just kidding, of course, but yeah, that's Sonic's ending. And now we have Knuckles' bad ending. Even without collecting the Chaos Emeralds, Knuckles, it's basically the same thing except he's not glowing. The exact same animation, like Knuckles will let Tails catch him, and instead of the bald eagles we get red flickies. So that's pretty much, the only difference with Knuckles' ending here is that he gets some red flickies and he isn't glowing in his super colors if you don't get all the Chaos Emeralds. Fucking significant change, am I right? But yeah, so again, that's just one of the other endings that you can get in the game. And then finally we have Tails' ending, which doesn't change depending on whether or not you get the Chaos Emeralds. The cutscene doesn't play at all for Tails' version, so they didn't change anything to make it look like Sonic was gonna go into the tornado to get him or anything. So instead what we get is this like fucking screensaver here of Tails just falling endlessly for quite a few seconds actually. It plays all throughout the bit that would have been that little sequence of images. So he falls, and again, like, he doesn't have a super form or anything, so this doesn't change whether or not you have Chaos Emeralds. So, playing as Tails is kind of inconsequential, whether or not you get the Emeralds. But here comes Sonic, finally to save him, I guess to make up for his bullshittery, and Tails gets chickens, because he is a chicken, I guess. I don't fucking know. So I guess Sonic wanted to make up for his douchebaggery earlier. I don't hate you anymore, Sonic. And yeah, he saves Tails, and they both fly off and celebrate their victory over Eggman. There's plenty of pre-release info and unused elements in the game worth discussing. Here's some I found particularly interesting. Here's a quick look at the scrapped holographic cartridge labels I mentioned during the Sonic run. Considering that these were even printed, I've got to imagine the decision to axe them was made late into production. As far as unused enemies go, we have a couple that were only seen in concept art like this, but I'll be focusing on ones that made it into early builds of the game. First up is B-Bat, which would have been used in Hidden Palace Zone, and according to Sonic Retro was going to be similar to the Batbots in Sonic 3. Next is B-Fish, which can be placed as a debug object in Hidden Palace Zone in the Simon Y and Nick arcade prototypes. Then we've got Bubbler and the creatively named Bubbler's Mother, which would have been underwater enemies in Chemical Plant. Bubbler's mother would have purposely dropped her baby, causing it to explode. Someone presumably called the authorities before they could make it into the game. To start with some more familiar looking ones, we have Gator, who would have been used in Dust Hill Zone, and is placeable in Hidden Palace in the Nick Arcade prototype. This bad Nick was mostly going to roll around back and forth, and would have also used its jaw to hurt Sonic. Reds is a tiny little T-Rex that was going to be in Hidden Palace Zone. In the prototype builds that it's present in, it behaves like a Motobug, but in the 2013 mobile release of the game it also spits fire at you. Next up is Snail. Snail was going to be in Emerald Hill Zone until they decided to replace it with coconuts. Its behavior was similar to that of the Rhinobots in Sonic 3, and it can be placed in Emerald Hill via debug in the Stealth Taxman version of the game. And finally, we have this poor soul. This derpy looking badnik is called Stegway, and was yet another scrapped Hidden Palace badnik, which can be placed in said zone via debug mode in the Nick Arcade prototype. It, like a couple of the others, were restored for the 2013 release. In it, Stegway moves back and forth until spotting Sonic, at which point it'll rev up and charge at him. I presume the plagiarism is why it was scrapped from the original version of the game. Now, I've mentioned these two pre-release builds of the game in both the LP and this video, but what else is there to say about them? Well, for starters, the Simon Y and Nick Arcade prototypes are builds of the game that somehow got out of Sega's hands and were eventually dumped online. The Nick Arcade prototype, which is the earliest build of the game available online, takes its name from an old Nickelodeon game show, where this version of Sonic 2 was featured as a playable demo. The ROM was also showcased at the Summer CES in 1992. Someone got a hold of the cartridge and it was sold to Sonic Retro member DRX for $1,500 in 2006, and it was subsequently dumped online. Interestingly, the cartridge used for this build had the holographic label that would be scrapped from the game's retail release. The Simon Y prototype was a more advanced build of the game that was shown off at a toy fair in New York at some point in 1992. Some nefarious Weisenheimer decided to steal the ROM and it was copied and distributed throughout Southeast Asia and South America during the 1990s. So somewhere out there are people who grew up thinking this broken build was the legitimate Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Anyway, the ROM was discovered on a Chinese website by a man named Simon Y in 1999, and the community named it after him. So what about the contents of these ROMs? Well, there are quite a few differences, like the title screen, this weird animation that plays when Sonic hits a wall at high speeds in the Nick Arcade build, Sonic 1's level select menu being present in both ROMs, unsurprisingly proving that this game was built up on top of the first, and most of the cut zones being present in the Simon Y prototype, though only accessible via level select, among other things. Cybershell made a video that goes into more specific detail about the differences between these pre-release builds and the finished game, which I suggest checking out. Links in the description. Now we're getting into some cut zones from the game. As I mentioned in the Sonic run, there were originally going to be 18 zones for the Blue Hedgehog to run around in, but time constraints forced the devs to cut it down to 11. So let's take a look at some of the scrap zones and see what kind of ideas they had in mind. For these zones, I'll be using footage from the ROM hack Sonic the Hedgehog The Lost Worlds. The hack's not that good, but it'll do for the purposes of this video. The first one we're going to talk about is Rock Zone, or Rock World Zone. Not much is known about what it would contain other than the scrapped Bonper enemy. Considering the rocky environments of both Mystic Cave and Hidden Palace, Rock Zone may in fact have been just a working title for one of them. Next up is Dust Hill. Aside from the badniks mentioned previously, the only official information regarding this zone is a couple of mock-up pictures and the name being used for Mystic Cave in the Simon Y prototype, which makes me believe that Mystic Cave replaced it. There was also a planned Winter Zone, which according to zone designer Brenda Ross was going to be a palette swap of this stage. Wood Zone was going to be a forest level, and a small section of it was playable in the Simon Y prototype. The zone can be accessed in the final game by putting in a Game Genie code, but only its palette and music data remain from the prototypes. Before we get into the next zone, let's talk about its name. I did say it was kinda fucked up in the LP, but Genocide City Zone was really a level named by some Japanese developers that didn't know English and wanted a word that they thought might sound cool. After they were told what it meant by their English-speaking counterparts, the level was renamed Cyber City Zone. Meant to be a one-act zone, a fair amount of its assets eventually made up part of Metropolis Zone's third act. The zone is accessible in the final game via Game Genie, but it doesn't appear to use any of its original data. It's also impossible to beat, so Sonic will just have to sit there impatiently waiting for the rest of his days, never to see another zone. Speaking of other zones, I've saved the best one for last. According to Yuji Naka, Hidden Palace Zone was once meant to be the place where the Chaos Emeralds came from, and would have been played upon completing all of the special stages. If you won, you'd be granted with the ability to play as Super Sonic, which of course was just given to you automatically in the final game. A small section of it is playable in the Nick Arcade and Simon Y prototypes, showing it to be crystallized and rocky. It also features an object that resembles the Master Emerald, isn't that neat? It must have been cut fairly late into production, as it has its own level select icon, It, like the last couple of others, is accessible via Game Genie in the final game, but it's a complete and total mess. In the sound test, track 10 is speculated to have been this zone's theme, but in its playable appearances it uses Mystic Cave's two-player theme instead. The zone's name and its connection to the Chaos Emeralds were reused in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, though it looks very different from the Sonic 2 version. In the 2013 HD remake of the game, the infamous pit in Mystic Cave's second act took you to a restored Hidden Palace zone, using the aforementioned multiplayer music and featuring its own original boss. Time to move on to some more random stuff that I couldn't figure out where else to put in the video. For some more pre-release information, I mentioned previously that Sonic 2 would have had a time travel gimmick. Unlike the time travel in Sonic CD, it wouldn't have been a straight-up past, present, future for every zone. Instead, the levels you played through were entirely dependent on what time you were in. There would have been 4 time periods to play in as shown by these maps: Ancient Time, Present Time, Ruined Present Time, and Future. Suggested in the diagrams is also a medieval time, but there's no map to show for it. In order to switch time periods, Sonic would have had to travel to something called a warp point, which obviously means that this game was a total ripoff of Super Mario Bros. This one's pretty hard to notice just from playing the game, but did you know that Super Sonic's sprite was made to look him more muscular? Here it is compared to Sonic's normal sprite from the game. As you can see here, they decided to ditch that concept for Sonic 3 and all Sonic-related media afterward. Just another case of what TV Tropes calls early installment weirdness. Back to debug mode we go for a fairly well-known glitch. When playing an Emerald Hill Zone with debug active, press B to turn Sonic into a ring and then press A 4 times to scroll to an invisible object that will place large waterfalls. Make sure not to press A a 5th time to get the normal waterfall object because it won't work. Place a bunch of these waterfalls with the C button while moving the camera back and forth, and press B to turn back into Sonic. If done correctly, you'll have confused the color palette into turning Sonic green and black, though we can also have other colors. This is what is known as the Ashura glitch, and some Sonic fans have treated this discoloration as a separate character, to the point where there was even going to be a fan game about him which promised to be darker and more aggressive than your typical Sonic fare. It has been in development hell for well over a decade, with no release date in sight. In many Sonic games, bonuses will be awarded to your score for quicker times and higher ring counts. This is common knowledge, but there's a little known bonus you can add to your score by collecting every ring in an act, which automatically gives you 50,000 points and an extra life. This doesn't work in every act as there are inaccessible rings in some of them, but when available it's a nice reward for being explorative. Something that the Japanese box art for nearly all the classic Sonic games had was some kind of inspirational text. For Sonic 2, as well as Sonic 1, it reads, "Don't just sit there and waste your precious time. When you want to do something, do it right away. Do it when you can. It's the only way to live a life without regrets." Hot damn, Sega, I just wanted to play a video game and then you just lay this deep shit on me. But for real though, all of these texts are amazing and I'll be sure to read them off in my Sonic CD and 3 and Knuckles extra videos. Years before it really became a thing in the West, Sonic 2 actually had a pre-order bonus upon release in Japan, in the form of a VHS tape. This tape was called the Sonic 2 Chira video, Chira meaning peek as in sneak peek if my research is correct. It contains some entertainingly silly potshots at Mario, and uses footage from one of the American Sonic 1 commercials for some reason. I like these bits when a character gets introduced and this lady shows up in the corner. Reminds me of the South Park episode Chimpokomon. They do the same thing with the footage from an interview with Yuji Naka, and also edited together this trippy shit. There's a sequence featuring the lady I mentioned earlier playing through Casino Night. I have no idea why, but this footage feels like the setup for some kind of low-rent porno movie. I see you really like playing Sonic 2. They also show some behind-the-scenes footage for the Japanese commercial, which is pretty nice. Then at the end of the video, they display some merch and advertise a Mega Drive coupon, which I guess Sonic 2 came with. It's a nice look at the game from around the time it came out, and it's on YouTube, so I'll leave a link in the description. There's no English subtitles for the time being, so until someone does translate the video, I will take it upon myself to mimic bootleg English translations of Japanese media at the time with this substitution.
スピンダッシュっていう新しいアクションを入れまして、その場でしゃがんでボタンを押すことによって、
Speaking of the game's release, a little fun fact. Sega put a lot of marketing into the North American and European launch of the game, promoting November 24th, 1992 as Sonic Tuesday. There was even a launch event held on that day by Sega of America that hosted 90s sitcom stars as guests, such as Dustin Diamond. Dustin Screech Diamond, guys! Truly, Sonic was amongst the elite.
So, take the first one, double it, and you got Sonic 2.
Glad to know you can count, Dustin. They also got the most nervous person in the world to put in a good word for the game.
With the split screen, with Tails being a great character add onto Sonic, it looks like Sega really has a winner.
How dare they make Sonic do heavy lifting despite his back injury? Sega of Europe also held a launch event on November 24th, featuring a double-decker bus, the finest official depiction of Tails in any capacity, and this weird-ass comparison.
There has been massive anticipation, and clearly it's going to be, I mean, it's comparable to the launch of Madonna's sex book, you know, Sonic Tuesday. The shops are going to be besieged with people desperate for Sonic 2.
But seriously, the tremendous success of the promotion helped popularize Tuesday as a launch day for video games in both regions. It was released on November 21st in Japan, most likely due to the Japanese government requesting video game companies to release their titles on the weekends in order to minimize the loss of work hours. Their version of the launch event looks like it was a hastily put together street performance for the entertainment of extremely bored businessmen, while other people were having fun inside. And that about does it. After all these years, I am done with the Sonic 2 LP at last. Sorry to anyone who had the patience to wait 3 years for this video to come out. This is a really good game, even if the second half takes kind of a downturn in quality. There's a reason so many people love it and is often chosen as people's favorite game in the series. If you haven't played it before, I wholeheartedly recommend you try it out. And so ends my Let's Play of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Sega Genesis. I've been Skull902, thank you for watching, and have yourselves a wonderful day. Take it away, French kid!
Sonic 2 is super. Désolé, même dans le 1,